the Gongfu Crew podcast, bringing together practitioners of various styles and schools and their unique perspectives to explore the world of Chinese martial arts. In this episode of the Gongfu Crew podcast, we will talk about Bajiquan, a northern style of Chinese martial arts that became famous because it was trained and used by many bodyguards of the late 19th and then the 20th century. My guest is Vincent Mei, originally from Taiwan, who is now residing in New York City. He learned in the Wutan school of Chinese martial arts in Taiwan, which goes back to Liu Yunqiao, a famous teacher who learned and taught several styles of martial arts, but was most renowned for his Bajiquan and Piguazhang. Actually, he combined both systems. And through his students, among them famous teachers like Adam Xu, his style and the Wutan branch spread to many other countries, including the United States, but also many European countries and other places. Now, Vincent was kind enough to share his insights regarding Bajiquan specifically, but also the general Wutan school of martial arts. And it's quite interesting to look at the entire curriculum. But since we want to focus on specific training methods, we will be talking a lot about Bajiquan and how it generates power, how it approaches its training within the Wutan training system. As always, I hope you enjoy the episode, and I hope that you gain insights regarding your own martial arts practice, as well as specifically Bajiquan and Chinese martial arts in general. Welcome to the Gongfu Crew podcast. Vincent, thanks for being here. It's a pleasure to have you. And maybe just so that the listeners know who I'm talking to, maybe you can give a short introduction of yourself, let them know who you are and what you do.
Sure. Thank you, Daniel. The pleasure is mine. Thanks for inviting. And my name is Vincent Mei, and I practice Bajiquan mostly, and basically the Wutan system, the Taiwanese Wutan system under Grandmaster Liu Yunqiao. So Baji, Pigua, Bagua, and so those are my main focus. I currently reside in the U.S., live in New York. I'm in digital marketing business. And I've been practicing this particular style and since college.
Oh, yeah. Nice. So before we go into also your own learning journey, I think that's always interesting. But before we do that, maybe let's do a bit of housekeeping and talk about martial arts, specifically Chinese martial arts, and also the terminology. Do you have any kind of definition? What constitutes a martial art from your point of view? Like, what would a training system have to have in order for it so that you would call it a martial art?
Yeah, I think there's so many different martial arts. I think martial art developed from cultures, like various different culture has different ways of fighting due to wars or entertainment. And traditional Chinese martial art is quite unique because it has a strong ties with the history, the culture, especially, with the Taoism, Confucianism, and Buddhism. It has that strong tie, and you can't really derive from that if you want to really dive deeper into Chinese martial art. So I do kind of not separate, but I view them differently. Like martial art is, if you look at, say, Krav Maga or a lot of this different martial art, they either develop for strictly combat or strictly sports or entertainment, such as wrestling or certain styles of wrestlings are developed for entertainment purpose. And Chinese martial art, obviously, like most people would say, are developed on a battlefield, but there's more than that. So I feel like when you train Chinese martial art, you have to attach with a lot of aspect of the culture with it.
Mm-hmm. But it wouldn't be, what I'm understanding is that it wouldn't be a requirement for something to be a martial art to have that cultural aspect. It's just that Chinese martial arts came about in that context, right?
If you want to dive deeper into it, as I mentioned, Chinese martial art obviously A lot of people train it for strictly combat, just a variation of a combat system. But if one wants to dive a little deeper into it, the language becomes a big part, and understanding that context. I know students who previously follow another teacher who taught the movement or a form or something and named the form by numbers, number 1, number 2, number 3, or A, B, C, D, E. And it completely lost a lot of the deeper essence of it. It's strictly external movements. And sometimes these names lends into a deeper understanding from inside out, synchronization from the mind and the body. And most of the time when people talk about mind and the body, it's not this philosophical or mystic way, but it's just a better way a more direct way to generate power and to apply power inside out.
Since you already mentioned names or also terms, I'm assuming since you're in the US that you would mostly use the term martial art as well to call to name what you do. But are you also referring to this as Kung Fu, Gongfu, Guoshu, Wushu, or what are usually the terms you would apply to this?
I use TCMA, traditional Chinese martial art. Gongfu to me is too broad of a term. In Chinese culture, we call a lot of things Gongfu, like making noodles can be Gongfu, making sushi can be someone with good Gongfu, or tailoring shifu is very good Gongfu. So like what style of martial art do I practice? Sometimes like just for better, easier understanding, I sometimes say Gongfu or to have a easier, more distinct differentiation. Gongfu, Kung Fu. Traditional Chinese martial art is what I typically use.
And how did you? So let's maybe switch to your own martial arts journey. How did you get into this? Like, what got you interested in martial arts practice in the first place? How did you start out?
I grew up in Taiwan, and growing up has always in the 80s. And always been influenced by movies, cinema from Hong Kong, Kung Fu cinema, and also manga and martial art fictions by Jin Yong. So always been fascinated by it, but never got a chance to learn it when I was in Taiwan. And then when I left Taiwan and came to the States to study, I was in middle school, and I learned a little bit of Muay Thai. And for a very short amount of time. And it was in college, I had a classmate who came from Taiwan, who previously trained in authentic 7-star praying mantis. And I trained with him at the gym. He taught me some 7-star praying mantis stuff. And we just trained the gym after school every day. And then he mentioned something about Bajiquan, and then he found this book written by Liu Yunqiao, Grandmaster Liu Yunqiao at the time, and then he got this book and he just trained by the book. And then I didn't know what it was. Then my father found a local newspaper. That's when my teacher, my shifu, moved into the next town, and he posted an ad. So on the grand opening day, me and my friend, we walked in, and then we became 师兄弟, and then ever since, yeah.
So you became essentially you were disciples like right away? Or is
No. It took a while. It took 7 years for us to be disciples. Yeah.
Would have been surprising. To show up and say, "Hey, let's do this."
Like here's the incense and here's a tea.
Yeah. All right. What was it about Bajiquan though that interested you? I mean, obviously, when you started out, I mean, there was a bit of chance involved, but it was also a decision, right, that you would actually train this.
It wasn't so much about decision on this particular style. Wutan is a school that when it established, it's got a mindset of preserving good traditional Chinese martial arts. So Wutan's system had Baji, Pigua. It even had Tai Chi. It's a Chen Tai Chi. It has Yang Tai Chi. It has Xingyi, Bagua. It has many different styles, but the core styles are the Baji, Pigua, Bagua. And those were not really my interests. I just wanted to learn Chinese martial art. And when we first started, we trained in long fist, and then a little bit of praying mantis, a little bit of Tai Chi. So the method itself is basically quite unique. It's basically utilizing various different styles to train Bajiquan. Mm-hmm. So as I mentioned, it took us 7 years to become disciple, but by the time we became disciple, we already had a lot of the biomechanics already trained. Mm. So in another way, I can say this is that ever since day one, when we step into the school, a lot of the advanced Bajiquan biomechanics and how we move, how we structured has already been sprinkled in throughout that 7 years. So we were already prepped for it. He just never said it.
So what you would say that Bajiquan is still kind of maybe has the most impact on how and what is trained? Because it sounds a bit like what you describe, sounds a bit like the logic also of the Jingwu Association, like back in the Republican times where they said, hey, let's be a bit more eclectic and use different training methods, different forms, but have one system, one training system. But usually Bajiquan is the one thing that kind of stands out, and when people think of Wutan, it's usually like, oh yeah, Baji Pigua as kind of the formative element.
Yes. So there's so many different styles of Chinese martial art, and if I have to say something that is unique about traditional Chinese martial art as overall, is 禅师镜. So 禅师is what makes Chinese martial art, and across multiple different styles, they all have this thing called 禅师. Bajiquan, of course, has 禅师镜, has 沉醉镜, has all kinds of its own emphasis of jin. But say Taijiquan has emphasized in China 禅师镜, they're the expert in 禅师镜. Say Pigua Tongbei has their emphasis in waste generated, power and whip-like power. So they have their own way of specializing training. So this is the Wutan system, is that there are systems that are emphasized in certain things. Instead of saying in Bajiquan, we'll say, okay, we cover these, but we don't have a specialty in a specific jin development. It takes longer time. So if Taiji offers a more concentrated 禅师镜 training, let's train in that. If Tongbei Pigua provides a more dedicated Songtan, right, that sort of training, then let's use that. So that's how we sort of utilize this sort of mixed martial art system to cross-stimulate martial art, and then to propel and shorten the training time.
What did training look like then when you started out? I mean, you said you started with Changchuan. Was it in stance training? Was it Tantui-like forms, or was it what?
So Tantui, right? So Tantui system. I think long fist is like I said, different style offers different concentrated training, methodologies, and Changchuan offers structure. Right, a very clean structure. Gongfu, Mahu, Dulibu, all these are very distinct. So it's perfect for someone who's starting out, has no background in Chinese martial art, can develop that proper structure. So that's why long fist was taught first, and we started out from Tantui, Gongli Quan, these sort of long fist system, the elementary level system, to provide a beginner proper structure.
Basically stance work. I mean, the stuff that you mentioned, Mabu, Kung-Fu, like horse stance, bow and arrow stance, for in case people don't speak Chinese. Would it also already include applications, or was it mostly solo practice, or practicing maybe forms together, but essentially doing solo practice?
Mostly solo practice, and there are two main sets, right? So the purpose of that is that we can look at a lot of the traditional Chinese martial art practitioners now, the schools that emphasize in application or fighting, sparring. In the earlier time, a lot of students you can look at it, and it ends up not looking like anything that they practice. So we try to avoid that. If we rewind our time, say 200 years ago, China, rarely people have seen boxing. Like even boxing didn't really look like boxing back then. So we need to move and really, in order to maximize our style and what they learn, they have to move, and no matter defense or offense, footwork, everything has to be in body structure. Everything has to be in that style. So, and that takes a little bit of time to train. Even boxing and Muay Thai, it takes years to have the right form. So Chinese martial art is no different. So we don't introduce sparring or too much. Like we show application. This is how you use it, so that people understand. Obviously, it helps with the posture and everything, and the mentality delivery. But not too much about sparring, so that you can maintain that structure. We spend more time developing that structure, that footwork, how to move, how to develop power, how to deliver power, structure, so that it doesn't get affected. Not until for maybe to a point where the practitioner has a proper structure, then he can really benefit from other styles, modern style or other traditional styles.
How long did it take you to then actually get into Bajiquan, since you started out with these more basic forms?
Like I said before, it was since day one. It was sprinkled in, and that's also affected the way I teach nowadays. But real get into Bajiquan is after Baishi, after our discipleship ceremony.
Okay.
Yeah.
So really advanced.
Prior to that, we learned some forms, a lot of drills, but those are all the essential things that builds up to Bajiquan. But officially say, hey, this is you guys now learning Bajiquan, but in fact, we've been learning for 7 years.
Yeah. Did the training then change after you did the Baishi ceremony?
Not really. The intensity got a lot more intense. Yeah.
So as you mentioned that in the beginning you don't focus too much on sparring, other than applications, and it also takes a while to get into the specific styles, as you move through the curriculum. How does it, or what does it look like then when you actually do put more emphasis on the partner training? Is it just like sparring everybody together, or do you do this specifically for different styles, different training methods, or how do you approach it?
Right. The partner training, there are a few stages. There could be a two-man set that's already pre-designed, right? That's already pre-designed, and just A side and B side, they basically just do their routine. And it's not completely ineffective, but that introduced the distance control, right? So and the movement. So it's basically textbook, right? Those are the textbooks. I oftentimes refer forms as textbooks. Right, we go to school, we use textbooks, but you can't use textbook in the society once you graduated in a job. You could, but it's not as doesn't work that way. So two-man sets are like textbooks. So you learn the speed control. When someone step forward one step, you back up one step, and then you do this, you do that, and so you understand the textbook version of the form, how to apply the forms. Then you get into the single drill, right? So someone deliver a random punch, or 2 random punches, 3 random punches, and then you get into that sort of training. Then we try free sparring. Then you understand, oh my God, this is completely different, right? So free flow, I don't know what is coming. Then I have a method of basically you do what you do, but wait for what you want, right? Because your opponent is going to deliver left, right, whatever kicks. You think about the move that you want to apply, maybe 2 moves, not a lot, but then when you just wait for that cross, or you just parry, and then wait for that cross, or wait for that right kick or something like that. So you're starting to read and understand the timing a little bit better.
So if I understand you correctly, though, what I'm inferring from what you said before is that you do this also the solo practice, practicing yourself to establish form, but also to start to understand the different jin, the different force types that you're trying to develop, and then in the partner practice you can try and also apply them and understand how to use them.
Correct.
What would you say are because you already mentioned that some certain training methods or styles focus on specific types of force generation and also delivery. So maybe you can dive a bit deeper into Bajiquan specifically and what it tries to develop, and maybe also Bajiquan, because I think in your case it's kind of meshed together, right, in your system.
Right. Yeah, I think different style has different flavor, right? The flavor can come from the culture. For example, Baji is oftentimes known as a Huizhu martial art, which is the Muslim Chinese Muslim community developed this. 新六合拳, 茶拳, so even long fist, like they refer as the Muslim martial art. It comes with a certain, traits. They're more aggressive because of that whole background about the Confucianism, the Taoism, that whole stuff. But when it comes to the Muslim martial art, it's not those three. It's the Muslim sort of the cultural influence. So Bajiquan itself, if I have to say, what is Bajiquan like? Bajiquan is, as the name refers to, is 8 extreme. Right, so its power expand in all directions. It's like a grenade. So if, say, 7-star praying mantis is very fast, it strikes five strikes at once. Every strike delivers five punches. So so that's like a machine gun, or Wing Chun is like a machine gun. It's really fast. Bajiquan is like a grenade, or Bagua can be like a tornado. It sucks your opponent in. Tai Chi is like water or whatever. Bajiquan is like a grenade. You basically place yourself close distance into your opponent's, taking over your opponent's territory, and they explode. And that explosion means that no matter it's a punch or whatever you do, it doesn't just have one-sided power. It goes in all directions. It just explodes. So that's what we call the 爆炸劲, and that can be developed from, we call it 十字劲, the up, down, left, right. You basically do the expansion,
like a cross, right? Like an X, like a
cross.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So in Taiji you call it 彭劲, right? So that's the similar type of mindset. We just call it 十字劲, but in a more extreme fashion. So to train upon, we have a very complete system to develop various different jin, right? So we have the 3 very essential jin, the 十字劲, as I mentioned, and then the 沉醉劲, which is the sinking strength, which many styles has it too, and then the 禅师劲. So the 十字劲 and 沉醉劲, they're more static. 禅师劲 is what comes in between, from movement to movement. You want to go from point A to point B. You're in your motion, you need 禅师劲 to deliver. And we have this drill called 马步冲锤. Essentially, it's a punch and in a squatting position, and you just deliver punches and just take strides forward. And that itself includes, it looks like someone holding a spear. It's similar to Xingyi's drill set, but in the 马步 fashion. Xingyi has the 四六步 or the 虚步. The Bajiquan has 马步, so we just basically do that walk, quote unquote walk, and that itself has everything in there. It's in motion. We call it 活桩, right? So a lot of times people say 站桩 and static, although the internal has a lot of movement, but it takes time for someone who's a beginner to understand, static posture, staying there for half an hour, right? So like it takes a bit of the time to really understand what's going on. But 活桩 is our approach. Basically, you're doing a 桩 but in motion.
Yeah, it's a living pole then, right? Like
or a live pole.
Yeah. Interesting.
So that is our go-to drill. You train that in day 1. I still train it after almost 30 years of practicing this. The more you practice, the more you discover. And this drill set has encompassed a lot of the Bajiquan essence, from lower level all the way to advanced level.
Interesting. I like the separation into these three basic forces, because it does also relate very much to also our Chen style Taiji practice and other styles, especially the sinking force, like you mentioned, super essential for a lot of training methods, at least Northern Chinese. But yeah, that's really nice. And you mentioned already like a similarity to Xingyi with this. Is Bajiquan also kind of spear heavy in its thinking? Is it was it
Yes, very
influenced?
much.
Okay.
Just like Xingyi, Bajiquan clearly was evolved from spear. Our ancestors were all great spear fighters. And these are, I mean, try not to dive too much into the history, but some of the movement, the power generation, and also the advanced level, we use daqiang, like a 300 centimeter long pole to train. We call it, that's our version of weight training. But we don't introduce that early because, if you don't have that body mechanic or so-called the muscle memory, or we call it the structural memory, you will rely on your arm muscle to wield the daqiang, this heavy daqiang. Until one has developed a really smooth, or natural body mechanics, then when you wield the daqiang, you use your entire body, and you have this added weight, and that increase your gongli, your power, precision of this body movement. It's very much evolved from daqiang. From dynasty to dynasty, they always the new dynasty emperor always want to like just wipe out all the previous dynasty martial artists, because they have the ability to rebel. So they all fled everywhere into the disguise as civilians or whatever, or went into a temple, and then they have to teach empty hand. And then that's how a lot of these styles sort of like evolved into empty hand styles.
Yeah, and in my mind, I mean, I mentioned before we started the podcast, I do have a bit of training in Bajiquan behind me, also in the Wutan line, and it always struck me that the logic of the training felt a bit similar to Xingyi, also in this regard, that you have very basic movements. I mean, outwardly very basic movements in the beginning that you really focus on to understand the mechanics, and then I mean, back then when we trained, we had I think like 8 movements, when put it together, and then you had the first small form. Which I found very similar to Xingyi with the 5 fists, and then you put it together, and then you have the Lian Huan Quan. So it's, I mean, I don't want to talk about the historical connections, if there are any, but in terms of the mindset, it seems a bit similar in terms of how you approach this.
Yeah, these are so-called the Northern styles, right? So the Northern style has a commonality of utilizing drill sets, single movement drill sets. And then they document it with forms, right? So certain forms were put together for easier teaching, maybe. I use the analogy of textbook. Basically, I think Xingyi and Baji are very similar, right? So I think Xingyi's drill set to me is more difficult to understand by a beginner. I think Bajiquan is very good in terms of its movement and structural explanation is very easier understood by elementary level or beginners. And then as it moves forward to advanced level, we no longer use mabu. Our mabu sort of becomes, we call it the 不公不马, because it's not 公布, it's not mabu, so it's a bit in between. So what is it? It's more like a 40-60 weight distribution. It becomes closer and closer to Xingyi Quan.
Interesting.
So to me, these two styles, no matter how you enter the style you train upon, these two particular styles becomes very similar. And if you dive into the history, they're very similar in terms of that whole spear mindset, right? The body mechanic, the spear mindset, the fajin, the can, the circular, energy. So they're almost, in many ways, they're very identical at the end of the day.
Yeah. So you did mention forms. How much or how many forms would be in your Baji system?
We only have 4 forms. To be honest, I think there are 3 forms, and then the 4th one were created later on. So we have 小八级, or in China they call it 小架, right? Then we have 大八级, 大架. Then the 六大开, 六大开 is a drill set, but it's mainly on, as the name refers to, it's suggested, it's the open door. Teach you the method how to enter your opponent's gate.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's 连环拳. 连环拳 was later on developed in Taiwan, but this set was pretty well put together. It's basically a validation of a more advanced level of expression. And people hear about the Baji and Pigua. They're completely different, drastically different styles, but yet they complement 100% with each other. So this 连环拳 has a lot of that Baji 参披挂 elements to it. Mm-hmm. It's no longer that it's still explosive, but it's advanced level, so you're able to switch it on and off with the Baji and Pigua practice. And Pigua is a requirement.
So that's what I thought about asking. So I guess the idea is then, I mean, when people practice Baji and Pigua together, then they would create this form to maybe also cement this combination and show people how to actually put it together.
Yes, but it's very subtle. It's on the transition. It's how you switch between songjin. Right, so a lot of people say they would create a form like Baji Pigua, so you can visually see, oh, that's Baji, okay, and then you see a move come after his Pigua move, but it's not really that. It's not really the something that you can see. It's in the transition that's really benefiting between the two styles.
And as for weapons practice, I mean, you already mentioned the daqiang or the lance or great spear. Is Baji heavy on weapons training other than that? Or is it auxiliary, just like for people who are interested? Or
yeah, I mean, qiang is, obviously daqiang is very long to carry around. It's not easily, it's not mobile. So they develop in Taiwan right now. I have a few Kung Fu brother, they spend decades to develop, to bring back this daqiang as a sport, as a competition sport. So I think that they're already seeing quite a success on it. So people practice daqiang with Bajiquan. But we also have the normal, 7 foot or 6 foot long spear. We call it 六合枪 or 花枪. There you learn more techniques, because it's shorter, it's easier to carry around, and you have more techniques that's involved. Daqiang's also a lot of techniques, but it's more simplified. But it requires a lot more internal practice.
Yeah.
And we have the short staff. We have the sword. Sword is a big part in Wutan, Bajiquan. 空无剑, we practice 空无剑. Yeah, so in our Baji aspect, we have the jian and qiang, okay, and then we have pigua dao, we have other, then our bagua system has all the smaller weapons of bagua system, the antler knives, the needles, the hooks, but we don't have that, the ginormous bagua dao, but we don't have any of the bigger weapons, so we got all the small weapons.
Okay, I see. I'm also asking because you already mentioned that your daqiang training or your lance or big spear training is kind of your idea of weight training, and that seems to be a commonality in a lot of styles, that actually weapons, because let's face it, a lot of these weapons don't have much of an application today and in today's times, but they are still used quite often as strength training. Especially, I mean, in Chensta we have the dagan, which is essentially the same idea. I mean, you don't have a spear tip, but it's also 3 meters and it's super heavy and hard to move around. But do you do any other specific weight training? Do you have traditional weight training, or do you include modern types of weight training?
I don't suggest it, mainly because it's hard to avoid. I mean, to be honest, in today's age, that's always a hot topic. What do you do as a supplemental, for weight training? I don't weight train at all, but yet I can generate power that is way beyond my size. And our teacher, my teacher was he forbade weight training. I think the biggest part about weight training is that I mean, the whole science of fitness has evolved and has advanced so much today. I mean, I have seen very good weight training method that can really supplement traditional martial art training. For example, a lot of the functional training today using kettlebells and a lot of the methods can be applied and beneficial to martial art. I guess anything that utilize your entire body works.
Yeah.
Anything and traditionally, like they have like they hold the stone, the stone weight and things like that. There were traditional weight trainings before, and as long as you utilize your entire body. What I really against is isometric, like you only focus on a certain larger muscle groups. For example, a bench press or the leg push. You just lay down there and then use your leg to push.
Yeah.
So those are very targeted practice, and it will create an imbalance in your body. Yes, you will gain a lot of power in a certain part, but it also creates, like a imbalanced strength.
Yeah.
You will have overstrength in one part of the body and weaker on the other part, and they're not cohesively trained.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you mentioned also the stone locks, because some of the exercises look very much like modern kettlebell exercises, like what most people did before.
Yes.
And I guess that also seems to be quite common, that people usually say also you want to do strength training where you actually move, where you're not completely static, because it's at the end you need movement, right, to generate power. So that also totally makes sense.
Yeah.
And how about conditioning or like hardening the body? Is that part of Bajiquan or of the other methods that you use? Is it?
Not a lot. Traditionally, yes, but more so on the Pigua side, right? So Pigua Zhang, because your body is like whips, so you're using your arms to whip your opponent, but you can't whip your opponent with soft skin, soft, not in like non-conditioned arms. So Pigua comes with a lot of like palm conditioning and things like that. Baji, most people know Baji because of its elbow strike, right? So a lot of times I would say, if you take so-and-so's demonstration, if you take away his elbow attack, does that still look like Bajiquan to you? If the answer is no, then that's not real Bajiquan. But anyway, the Bajiquan attacks only in spots that they're not protected by thick pads of muscles or bones. It's just through years of training, you just don't even see those body parts as your target. The solar plexus, the two sides rib cages, the neck, the face. Like we don't strike punches to the side. We strictly do a palm strike onto the face. So no to body conditioning. Elbow strikes I mentioned elbow strike because that's the hardest part of your body. There are knee strikes a bit. So no, like not needed.
Interesting. Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, you don't need a lot of conditioning to hit someone with the elbow so that it hurts. You just need power.
Right.
Yeah. How does health feature into your training? I mean, this is a question that I always ask people, because a lot of people, I think, are also not drawn to martial arts, especially Chinese martial arts or traditional martial arts, because of they think like, oh, this is so healthy, the practice. And I mean, I guess it can be, but it always interests me how different training methods also think about health. And also, I mean, you already mentioned that, for example, Bajiquan doesn't have a lot of conditioning, because styles that do, they also have to be careful not to actually damage yourself by doing all the conditioning. So there's also sort of sometimes a trade-off. But do you have specific exercises in the system where you think, oh, let's do this for health practice? Or would you say, no, the entire system can be healthy if it's trained properly, or it should be? Or is it like a side thing?
Yeah. That's another, there's another major difference between traditional Chinese martial art versus any other martial arts. That there's a very important concept, is that we call it in Chinese, that say, the Western sports, hao means to consume. No matter what sport, swimming, running, sprinting, tennis, basketball, it consumes your body. So when one is, that's why you have to retire, or an athlete oftentimes has an injury that's that they carry for a long time. And if you practice Chinese martial art in the right way, it should be yang. Yang means to nurture. Okay, so that's a major effect, and also that should be something that to validate, if you're practicing correct or incorrectly. This should be a lifestyle. This should be part of you. Can it be functional? Yes, it could be functional, but then the functionality shouldn't just be a combative aspect of it. It should also be cultivating and nurturing your general health. Bajiquan, for example, it's considered one of the most effective combat style in Chinese martial art. It's also called the bodyguard style, right? So they don't choose Wing Chun as bodyguards, but they choose Bajiquan. So it's known to be very effective, very destructive, very powerful. But yet we're not. The way we practice is very much aligned with, say the Bagua, say the Tai Chi, the internal styles that are less damaging to the body. The explosion aspect of it is the Sizijin. Your head is always up, so your bone alignment is always in check, right? So you never like every time when someone's head is down when they're practicing. I always joke around, that person is practicing Qi Chuan instead of Baji Chuan, right? So they're missing one direction of power. So that explosion is incomplete.
So for the non-Chinese speakers, you have to explain, like, it's the 7, right? Qi,
right.
because then it looks like the neck sticking forward and not like upright with the cross.
Yes. So it's like a bomb. When it explodes, you cover one side with a plate,
right,
a steel plate or something. So it's not it's incomplete. So posture itself, it has that great influence. You always, posture is correct. Aligning yourself, you're always balanced. Same thing with Tai Chi practice. Your head has to be like Shulin Ding Jin. So shoulders always relax, so you're not tense. So just from a relaxation aspect of it, it's already a huge benefit, and mental health. And then you have the movement, the muscle training. So your heart rate increases, but also the channeling of the mind to various different parts of the body, similar to that a yoga can achieve, right? So you use external movement to stimulate your internal organs, where a lot of the modern sports doesn't offer that. Modern sport can channel lungs and heart. That's it. So in traditional martial art, you can use movements to stimulate your liver, stimulate your kidney, right? So various different parts of the body.
Yeah, because it's also integrated with the theory of Chinese medicine.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. I like the analogy with the bomb going off and you having a lid on one side, because I did have the experience. It's not just in solo practice when you practice something like Fajin, because Bajiquan is famous for the explosive power, but also when you practice with someone else and then you try to apply force, but your posture is off. Yeah. It's very likely that you will hurt yourself if you have power.
Yeah.
And my impression is that also in many sports, also modern combat sports, some people develop good structure, but it seems a bit accidental because they don't really focus on it. And then some people don't develop good posture and they hurt themselves by trying to bring in power, even though...
Let me add one part, because I know you have a lot of listeners, and I think this can be beneficial to that analogy of the bomb, like when you express power. So one thing about Bajiquan is that if you punch, say, 80 pounds or 100 pounds on one side, you want to apply the same 100 pounds on the other side, up and down, left, right, front, back. So what is in the middle? It's your brain. So if you apply Fajin too excessively on one side, your brain in the middle gets shocked. So over time, through stumping, through Fajin, shaking, your brain is in the middle, like basically you're killing your brain cell every day. But if you have the proper alignment, proper concept of Fajin, you always have that equal amount of power. Your brain in the center is just like the tornado eyes. It's the calmest. So it doesn't get shook or doesn't get affected. So you don't have to kill your brain cells every day. So that is a very important concept to training anything that is Fajin related. So you must make sure your brain is in the middle of power that are expressed in different directions, so it stays safe.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. Maybe a training method would be then when people do it improperly, you always give them a shot of hard alcohol, because that's what they're doing, right? They're killing brain cells in that moment so that they realize, oh, I did it again.
In that case, it's good. It's a good thing. Maybe a good thing.
In the beginning, you mentioned, when you talked about martial arts in general, in Chinese martial arts, you mentioned that they obviously were created in a culture that was heavily influenced by also certain philosophies or philosophical concepts coming from Confucianism, Buddhism, and so on. I think there's still also a strong idea that traditional martial arts lend themselves also for mindfulness practice, or that they have these spiritual qualities. Would you say that this is part of the training? Do you have specific forms of meditation or mindfulness practices that you also do, that you include? Or is this something that is more in personal development at some point, that you maybe take it in that direction if you want to?
Okay, so that's a really good question, because mind and body, mind controlling body, I mean, that's a no-brainer, right? You want your right arm to raise, you have to your brain has to tell it to do so. And a lot of these sort of the internal practice is that your mind is thinking, is channeling, you focus on certain part of the body, and that plays a huge part in application, right? If you want to strike a certain part, you have to think. For example, the most commonly used analogy is that even in karate, if you want to strike someone on the chest, you have to think you're striking someone in the back so the power can go through. So I think everybody who are listening this on this can understand that part. So that is an example of mind channeling power. So it plays a big part in traditional Chinese martial art practice, is that through movement, you need to constantly engage your brain, right? So whether it's slow movement or fast movement, I mean, slow movement obviously is a lot easier. So that way we can really use slower movement to train your mind and body become working together. So if you want to use your back to do a cow, right? So you don't want to just use your shoulder. So it's not really just, cut and dry. I'm using my shoulder to check somebody, but instead a lot of the cow is your entire back. And in order to deliver that, your mind has to think about that entire piece of your back, from your shoulder all the way down through your back, all the way to your kwa, your hip, to deliver that cow. That mindset, if that mindset wasn't there, your application is discounted and your movement couldn't be there. So the mind and body needs to be, we call it 六合, right? So the 内三合, 外三合. So it's like the
harmony,
internal three linking and the external three linking. These six has to be all in harmony in order to deliver the most optimal effect. So yeah, I think to us, like, mind and body should be trained in movements. It should be everywhere in our training. Doesn't necessarily have to be, a lot of people think about the mindfulness and you think about the meditation. Not necessarily, it should always be there when you're doing your forms or movement practice drills, even applications. So that intention has to be there.
That's interesting. I think, I don't know if you mentioned it in the podcast, but Nabil, who was on the second episode, he often mentions like neural mapping, making connections between what you're thinking and how you're moving. Yes. And I think maybe maybe there's a misunderstanding then coming in from the outside, that people always assume that it automatically becomes spiritual. But I think that maybe it's then more the personal expression, right? But you do have these connections there.
It's more plain. It should be more easily understood than creates something that's a little bit more harder to understand, more spiritual. So that's why we try not to, get into too much of a spiritual aspect of it. When I mentioned about the Confucianism, like the Taoism aspect of it, it's more so like Confucianism essentially affects the entire culture of like everyday, like the way we behave, the way we speak, the way we interact. Like it's there. The Taoism as well, Buddhism as well. It's more passive, right? So in comparison to the Muslim martial art, they're more aggressive. Maybe because they're a minority in China, constantly have to defend themselves from other tribes. Just the general Han's Chinese mentality is always more passive. Yeah, so that evolved into our martial art. So that's why it's always more reactive driven. If someone punches, then I react this way. Bajiquan and Xingyi, they're like, okay, I'm coming at you. So it's more offensive driven. So that's the part where the culture influenced the martial art development.
That's a more subtle thing actually than some people then try to take it literally and maybe make it into something else. All right. What direction do you hope for? We're talking about Chinese martial arts here, traditional martial arts. You also mentioned, or both mentioned, combat sports. Modern combat sports. That seems to be a big discussion. Like where is martial arts going? In general, like what are you hoping for regarding the traditional martial arts community? What should happen, or what are you hoping for that could happen in the future that would be beneficial?
I think, martial art development is part of the culture, part of the history, and throughout every era, there's a huge, change, right? So, for example, Qing Dynasty Chinese martial art was at its peak because you cannot carry weapons. The Manchurians came by and just say you're allowed to practice this, but empty-handed. And then there's also the underground rebellion force. They're training secretly underground. Most of the Southern style was influenced by that. And then because of that rebellion movement, it got widespread underground. And then in the North, essentially, all these weapon set becomes empty-handed. And when you have things evolve into empty hands, it gets more sophisticated. Then the Yang Taiji, the more Tai Chi aspect of theory comes about. Then you have Suijiao. Then when you come to the Republic time with the guns and the cold weapons and martial art becomes less influential, less important. Then every era has its own influence to martial art development, whether it's destructive or enhancing it. In today's age, I think although seemingly it's in a decline, but I feel like with the power of internet, that's what we have in today's generation. It also gets like widespread, and I think because of the internet, it kind of introduced and promotes Chinese martial art like never before, globally. And I have a platform called Bajiquan, and basically it was developed during the pandemic. And I myself never thought, this thing can be taught remotely. And it happened to work on earlier I mentioned about a lot of the drill set, the structure development, biomechanic development. Those are not necessarily required to have, you can train individually to spend about 1 to 2 years of time to dedicate it into developing these good habits. And then you can take this developed structure and then apply, with various different methods, whether you have a partner or not. So I do think the internet can help promoting this. That's the biggest advantage we have in today's age, like this podcast, for example. And having this whole MMA with the MMA fighter challenging fake masters in China, that also gave a lot of the Chinese martial art a wake up call. And I think that's a good thing. And it's also because of the internet, right? So internet basically spread that around. So even Taekwondo in Korea, they used to be very competition driven. In today's, you can starting to see Taekwondo getting more and more validated through combat. And I think that's also a wake-up call to across the board in Eastern martial art. And it's a good thing. And I do think Chinese martial art is here to stay, and it will be continue to evolve as it has been in the past 2,000 years. And what to say that whatever we learn from our teacher or grandmasters should stay the same, exactly the same, right? I do believe we should learn the authentic way and then evolve upon, right? I don't believe in learn it for 2 days and then just say, I can evolve it. You have to understand something in order to elevate it. It should be elevate continuously. And unfortunately, I've been seeing young coaches in Taiwan, in China. They are all thinking the same way. They're all very open-minded, but also properly trained.
Yeah, I think that's a very nice closing statement, because I'm hoping with this podcast also, to connect people who train Chinese martial arts, traditional martial arts, or people who are interested in this, and also maybe give them a bit of quality content, also to check their own training and think like, oh, okay, is this the right direction? Is this what I want to do with this? And I agree, the internet actually can be very beneficial. Also with the online teaching, it's great.
Well, I mean, obviously, it comes with the negative side too.
It usually does. I mean, and also what you mentioned, with MMA, and then maybe right now Chinese martial arts are a bit of a decline. But I think you're right. I think it's here to stay, and I definitely hope it is. But I also believe that it can stay, because it still has a lot of value to offer. And
for sure.
Thank you very much for the insights into your training and into Bajiquan specifically, but also the Wutan system. And maybe let's maybe we'll see each other, maybe even in person at some point. But also thinking in terms of the podcast, maybe with one of the later episodes where we dive deeper into some of these topics.
Of course,
could be nice. And
looking forward to that.
And until then, have a good time and keep training and teaching. And
all right, all the best. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks for listening to this episode. I hope you had a great time. The next episode will air next month. And until then, feel free to check out our Instagram account, where we also feature some of the people we talk to, other practitioners and teachers of Chinese martial arts, and anything else that might be interesting in the world of Gongfu. Thanks, take care, and hope to meet again.